So I'm just so thrilled to be able to do this because we've been meaning to do this for a really long time. And just for the record, you're going to hear from one of my favorite people in the world. I'm not going to call you a constituent. Obviously, I represent you, and I'm so blessed to know you and to be able to learn from you. We've known each other for a really long time. Um, I think you mentioned since I was 8 years old. And truly, I was just telling someone recently that you're a sounding board for me, particularly around issues that exist locally in our microcosm of the world, but we even have national conversations and talk about other issues. Um, and the person that I'm going to introduce you today to is Carole. And Carole, we want to start off by just hearing a little bit more about your story, your background, your upbringing, and then I would love to have people have an opportunity to hear about your take on some issues that we're dealing with, and certainly get your perspective. So, without further ado, thank you for doing this. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to again have these conversations with each other, but now people are going to be able to hear it. So here we go.
I got it. Hello, all. I'm Carole, and I have lived in Fox Point for a little over 25 years now. In Rhode Island, closer to 30 years. And I came to Rhode Island to take a short term teaching position, but that did not work out because I became critically ill within 6 months of arriving here, and that illness pretty much short circuited my life, my whatever I had planned for the future. I only knew one person in Rhode Island, and I barely knew her. I knew her because I had been to school with one of her cousins, and she took it upon herself to arrange for a whole slew of people to come in and support me during the major portion of my illness once I was well enough to be sit up. But life was life was quite difficult because after coming from a more academic background, I suddenly couldn't read the English language, let alone any other language. The first year after my illness, I could barely lift my head up, and it was a really hard slog to reteach myself how to be. And slowly but surely, I have rebuilt a life for myself, and in August of 2000, I moved to Fox Point, and I met John shortly thereafter. So here in Fox Point, I am a individual who walks the streets, walks a dog, and talks to my neighbors, and I listen a lot. I'm not from Rhode Island. I was born in New York City, and I've had a very varied life. I was a single child, and I have a few cousins who live further afield, very few that I'm in contact with, the others, who knows where they are. But pretty much the bulk of my life is here in Fox Point. I no longer have a car for the simple reason I can't afford to run one. My income is very low, and so I am dependent upon many of the federally funded state administered services. Whilst I do qualify for Social Security, I also qualify for food stamps and Medicaid, and I need these programs to keep me going. So the current situation is very alarming and, quite frankly, terrifying, because what else is going to disappear? With some of the new rules, I'm going to have to start paying for some of my prescriptions that are specific. They're not generic. There are very few that I take, but still, even $12 on an income that is roughly what most people bring home per week, I live on per month, it's not easy. But nevertheless, I try and listen, and I try and hear. I know what I need and want, and I try and listen to what others need and want. And thankfully, I have a councilman, John, who is receptive to what people need and to try and work with us to figure out ways to fill those needs. If everybody pitched in, things would be a lot better. One of the things that deeply saddens me is the lack of compassion that I am currently seeing in our world, where one of the sort of jokes that was on, I don't know, Facebook maybe, about planting fruit trees throughout neighborhoods, both for trees and climate and shade and fruit. And the first comment was, the homeless people will eat it. Yeah, so that's what it's for, folks, for people to eat. People who need that they can take and eat. But no, 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 no. Not in my backyard. No. Mm-mm. It's all over where most, it's very hard for many people, in my experience, many people to give directly to people that they come in contact with. It's much easier to send money to Gaza or to send money to Médecins Sans Frontières. It's much easier to give away. It's much harder to do it to people who you might meet socially. Why that is, I'm not sure. But it's something that I think we need to think about. Or if there's some way to put together a general fund that people can request money from. I don't know an answer. But what I do know is I see a great deal of suffering, not only children, but seniors as well. And I think there are ways that local communities can help support each other. We can help support each other.
And to that end, Carole, what you just shared was so vulnerable and real. And I know we've had a lot of conversations about this. And as you know, one of my philosophies is that I truly believe that the people who are closest to the problems are also closest to the solutions. Because you deal with it, you go through it, and you know exactly what you need. So if you were to speak to the world here, and that's what you're doing, what do you think it is that people really need? And how do you think, whether it's government, whether it's private parties, whether it's just people in a community, how do we get there? What do you think the solution is?
That's a tough one to answer. Part of it, I think, is because each situation is unique. I can only talk about my own. Two of the things that I need, or one very important thing that I need right now, is shoes for the winter. Um, I have a very difficult foot to fit, and I usually can't find shoes in the less expensive places. The bottom line is most people who are living at a certain level of poverty simply need more income. There have been in different countries projects where individuals were given a base income that, whilst not a vast amount of money, was much, much more than they would have had otherwise.
And I'm sure you've heard about universal basic income.
Basic, yeah, that is basically what every human being needs. In Any society, you need to be able to go out and purchase what you need when you need them, as opposed to having a whole long list that maybe once a year you can buy one or two items because somebody sends you a birthday gift or a Christmas gift. It's most people need more than what they receive. And this is separate from the food stamps, the Medicaid. I could go off and talk about we need universal health care, but this is a country that is based on business and insurance agencies are never going to allow that to happen. I've lived in places where it was the norm. People didn't have to worry about paying for an illness. People didn't have to sell, like I did, everything that I owned in order to keep a roof over my head until Social Security kicked in. And for the record, I received my Social Security benefits on the first try. I didn't have to get a lawyer to fight for them. I got them the first try, and I actually got them. I was told on the 3rd of September that as of the following month, I would receive my benefits of that at that time every month. I had just paid out the last bit of money I had for my rent. And that was, I sat down and I sobbed. Was it a vast amount of money? No. I think at that time it was, what, $575? Woohoo! But it was at least enough to cover my rent. And people need to know that they can buy enough food, that they can take care of their bills, and that those things that are needful in their lives, be it a new pair of jeans, be it a pair of shoes, be it a hat or a coat, that they can go out and get what they need without having to beg, without having to resort to secondhand. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. That's a choice. Vintage clothing is all in the rage, and some of it is absolutely gorgeous and very, very well made, so it lasts. But it shouldn't have to be a necessity, it should also be a choice.
And it goes back to just basic human dignity.
Yes.
So, speak about that a little bit more, and also as it relates to this moment in time that we're in right now, where we've got, and I know we're laughing about it, but it's as you know, it's a very,
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's just so brutal.
and it's just so, let's call it what it is, idiotic.
Well, that too.
And and it really boggles the mind that our leader of the free world, unfortunately, let's just call it what it is. The Trump administration is taking away food and holding food hostage. And when we think about the SNAP situation, how do you tell us more about how you're processing that? What are you hearing from other people? How is it impacting you? What should we do?
Well, one thing that really riles me is that federal workers are not being paid, but Congress is. Excuse me, you're supposed to be working, and you're not. You're not working for us. You're working for yourselves, and you are indeed being paid whilst everybody else is going without. And that, I think, is horrific. If the government shuts down, I don't think anybody should be paid. Senators, congressmen, staff. As for our executive branch, I'm not sure I could say anything directly without swearing, but I feel so frustrated. Here are people who have so much. They are in the supposed 1%, but yet are so grasping and greedy and careless. They don't give a hoot. So what if children starve, or they can't go to school, or learn? Years ago, I did a per diem stint as a teacher in New York City. And I remember kids coming to school hungry. And I remember myself and a bunch of teachers who would bring extra food that we just sort of slipped on their desk. And I remember one boy. I'll never forget him. I don't know what happened to him. And if he hears this and he recognizes me, please let me know. He would come into the classroom, and the first thing he'd do is put his head down on the desk and go to sleep. You can't learn anything if you're exhausted and you're sleeping, and so we got a beanbag chair. We put it in the back of the classroom, and he went and he slept on the beanbag chair. And he usually woke up around lunchtime, and I arranged so that I could sit with him, tell him what we did during the class time that he missed, whilst sharing a sandwich with him, or bringing him an extra one. I only had him for one term, and then he disappeared. I don't know, because was not given any information. But I look at that, and I think about people who aren't able to relax their bodies, people who aren't fed, children who are stressed, not only adults, but children. They can't learn. Well, it seems in the current administration that's preferable because they're like sheep. They can be herded wherever they're supposed to be. And I can't help but asking, what genius is being shunted aside in this push for white nationalism? Globalism is part and parcel with our current existence. And unless you're going to shut down all of the internet, it's not going away. And so it makes more sense to me to be curious about other people, to be curious about their cultures, their customs, their languages, their food. I think it's fantastic to learn and to engage. But no, right now, in along with the lack of compassion for all of those who, refer to themselves as good Christians, um, I see anti this and anti that. Anyone who disagrees with you is, well, they're either a terrorist or they're an anti something or other. It's absurd. There will always be good people in the world. There will always be negative people. That's a realistic assumption. Does conflict always have to be decided violently? No. But if people are going to constantly deal with a them and us, there'll never be any form of peace, no matter what you believe or profess to believe. You meet people and you deal with them. If you don't like them, okay, you don't have to. But you could also ask yourself, why don't you like them? I mean, there are people that I've met that I don't like. Why? They're dishonest. They're untrustworthy. Okay? I feel I'm within my rights not to like. But there are ways of dealing with people that you don't necessarily like because it's productive to do that. It's a very complicated reality, made more complicated by all of the various bits that are throughout. As I said, globalization is a reality, and it's not going anywhere. And so what's insulting to one is over the head of somebody else. But if we're able to talk to each other and explain, then it doesn't have to become an issue. And I look at all of the people who are just constantly talking about hate. Hate and more hate. It's anti-Semitism, anti-Catholic, anti-Muslim, anti-this, anti-that. How about pro? What are we pro? What are we for? I think that's much healthier to think about. I know lots of people. Some are friends, some are acquaintances, and some I stay away from. I stay away from them because I don't like the way they deal with people. That's my choice. But I'm not going out of my way to hurt them or destroy them. I just live and let live, so to speak.
This is just so powerful. And as I've told you a million times, this is why I wanted to do this, because I think the way that you articulate your views and your perspectives is something that people in the world really need to hear. So if you had a message that you were going to share related specifically, I really want to think about what's happening locally in our community as it relates to SNAP benefits, because that's something that has been top of mind for many of us. What what would your message be?
Well, concerning the lack of SNAP benefits, also the fact that for many people, SNAP benefits don't go very far. There's a very big difference between what is considered healthy eating and what is available in many pantries. That's not to say that the pantries aren't helpful, but often what they receive is I remember first when I first read this.
Shelf stable.
Yeah, well,
Foods,
shelf
like
stable, but the standard
not
American
organic.
standard American diet. This came out of the book Laurel's Kitchen, one of the early vegetarian cookbooks from back in the 70s. Still a darn good book. But the standard American diet, also called SAD, SAD. The pantries are good people. They try their best. But yet, as John says, they are given surplus, things that are left over, things that are, an exaggeration, but at least a day's worth of sodium in one can of vegetables. Even if you rinse it, you're not going to get rid of all of that. I think if you are in a position to help, talk to the councilman, talk to your elected officials, listen to what people really need. I was asked this question recently, and I put together a list. Most of the people I spoke to, they want to bake bread and cake for the holidays. Flour, sugar, brown sugar, yeast, baking powder, baking soda, things to allow them to bake. Many people can no longer afford things like jam. As one of my neighbors said, "Oh, I wish I could have some jam on PB." Well, yeah, PB and jelly, come on. That's an American standard. Well, jam, relish, mayonnaise, other condiments, quality rice, jasmine rice, basmati rice, barley, other grains, things that the general pantries don't stock, that people really, really would appreciate and really need. Most people don't open a jar of jam and down it in one sitting. They don't. A jar of jam can last me 6 months because I don't eat it very often. But it's sort of a security to know that it's there. And in talking with my neighbors, there are many basics that they're no longer able to afford. A quality olive oil, avocado oil, other cooking oils. If they're vegetarian, ghee. Jar of ghee nowadays is something like $11. Yeah, it's not something that I'm buying because I can't. Um, Most people asked when I asked them, "What do you need?" Eggs, chopped meat, chicken. They're not vegetarians. I am, so that doesn't affect me as much. But the point is that most of these items are no longer affordable. And most of my neighbors are seniors or disabled. When you have a family with children, and children need nutrition, be it vegan, vegetarian, or standard American diet, doesn't matter what it is, they need a higher amount of nutrition than I do. And they also need variety. That's one thing that I've learned in the new reality of my life. Not that I've ever been rich, but on the other hand, I've never actually been as poor as I am now. And when I was growing up, traveling was not as expensive as it is now. And some of my jobs allowed me to do a fair amount of that. Travel is very good for dispelling prejudice if you can go into places and try and meet the people that you're walking amongst. But that's a totally different subject. But choice is often missing when you have very little to spare and you are forced by necessity to choose a lesser product. I see this in so many different ways, not only in food, but in clothing needs. People talk about fast fashion. Well, I'm not talking about fast fashion, I'm talking about need. If you buy a cheap coat, you'll be lucky if it lasts a season or two. If you buy a good quality coat, you'll keep it for 10 years. But a good quality item is going to cost a lot more than you have in your budget to buy or to spend. So, choice is an issue that is exacerbated by poverty. And it also becomes an issue as it starts to put blockages on the mind. Your ability to think beyond or to allow your imagination to go further is often curtailed because you are constantly being hemmed in every direction. The people who live in the 1% or even the 10% of our realities, they have a freedom that most people will never experience. Even those who are getting a living wage that are not worrying constantly about how they're going to keep everything straight and pay what they need to pay. They have financial freedom. Lack of choice and constantly being hemmed in creates a prison all of its own. And that is something that I think this is on a negative side of our globalization and our reliance on technology because people aren't reading as much as they used to. Hopefully, that will change because reading can help open the mind even when it's hemmed in. It can provide other solutions or other possibilities. Um, Talking to people can also do the same and sharing. But a baseline income that is livable, I think, is a great, it is one of the best ideas in the world.
To that end, in talking about stories, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having the courage, but also just the sheer vulnerability of sharing your story today. And truly, I think everything that you share and everything that you express to the world is going to make a difference. And I just can't wait for people to to be able to have the opportunity to see this is I know you're very modest about this. I have told you about this a million times that you're too modest. But the way that you're able to articulate these ideas in a way that people resonate, given your lived experience, given the commonalities that people out there have, I just and you being able to share is with with all that vulnerability. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and it I mean it. It's gonna make a world of difference, and I'm excited to partner with you.
I'm listening.
To your dog. Oh, well, I'm excited to partner with you on our we're going to be launching a food pantry right here in Fox Point, and you've been such a great sounding board. And again, I just want to say thank you, and we're going to do this again. And the next time, I'm going to bring the book, and we're going to have a lot more to talk about. I think people are going to want to hear a lot more from you. So thank you, Carole.
Thank you, John. I do thank you. Get up.
Thank you
If
so
help
much.
somebody, so be it. I'm just me.